Welcome, dear listeners. Close your eyes. Now let your breath drift in slowly, and then out like a soft wind across a quiet meadow. Let your body feel heavy and warm. The world outside is far away. This moment belongs only to stillness, to a hush that grows like twilight beneath the stars. There is no need to think. There is no need to worry. You are safe here. You are gently held in a soft pocket of time, wrapped in warmth, drifting toward dreams. Our story tonight begins beneath the floorboards of a quiet house in a time long forgotten, beneath flickering candlelight and stone walls that hum with age. There is a room, small and hidden, and within it an alchemist writes. He is old, now his fingers are long and thin. Each stroke of its pen glides across the parchment like a lullaby. But this is no ordinary pen. It is a feather, a long shimmering feather, silver at its tip, left to him by a bird that sang only under the full moon. The cellar is cool, but not cold. The scent is thick with lavender, and dried rosemary bundles of herbs hang from the rafters. Tiny bells sway gently with the draft from the crack under the door. Each chime is soft, almost a whisper, as if the air itself wants to be careful not to wake anything too fast. The walls are lined with shelves, and on those shelves are bottles of every shape. Some are round and clear. Some are deep blue with corks sealed in wax. Others are etched with runes only the alchemist can read. Within them, powders and potions rest in sleep of their own. Some glow faintly. Some bubble slowly like a forgotten stream beneath winter ice. A fire crackles low in the hearth, its orange glow painting soft shadows across the stone floor. The alchemist leans forward in his chair. He writes a recipe tonight, one his dreams whispered to him the night before. A draught of silver sleep meant to calm the storms inside even the most restless soul. He dips the silver feather into a tiny inkwell made from polished bone, and the ink flows like melted. Starlight smooth, slow, quiet, he writes lavender from the garden, dried at midnight under a full moon. 3 drops of rain caught in the first hour of dawn. A whisper from a black cat's breath, 1 leaf of moonflower, 2 shavings of quartz, and a single tear from a happy dream. Each word he writes feels like a breath being exhaled, slow and easy. Each line curls across the parchment like tendrils of fog across the ground. He writes not just with the feather, but with memory, with silence, with hope. Above him, in the house that rests quietly over this hidden cellar, the world goes on sleeping. A candle burns low. In a window, a cat rests, curled on the hearth, upstairs, beyond the wooden walls. The forest listens, its trees swaying gently in the windless dark. as if they, too, are listening for the alchemist's quiet ritual. Once a week, he makes his potion. He does not sell it. He does not bottle it for trade. He places it in a small bowl carved from silver birch and leaves it at the edge of the woods by a stump, where owls perch and foxes pause. He never sees who drinks it. He only knows that by morning the bowl is empty and the forest feels just a little softer. He believes that sleep is a kind of magic and that dreams must be fed with care. So he feeds them as he once fed birds in winter, as he once fed the hungry child he once was. Tonight, as the potion brews, he hums quietly a tune no longer known to others, a song of old sleep and long summers. The fire crackles in agreement. The bells above his workbench ring gently, with no hand to touch them. A single page curls on the desk beside him. The ink not yet dry, and outside the stars are blinking into view. He will finish before the moon reaches its highest place. He always does. The silver feather seems to know just how fast to write, and the fire always knows when to soften somewhere, not far. A tree. A child stirs in uneasy sleep. A mother paces quietly with her newborn, and without knowing why they each begin to feel calm, as if the night is breathing with them, as if the world has turned just slightly softer for them. For now the alchemist lifts the silver feather one final time, writes one final note, and closes his book with a sigh that smells of cinnamon and pine. He stirs the potion with a carved stick of hazelwood, and the liquid within turns from violet to silver to stillness. He smiles, and the candlelight in his eyes flickers like the sky itself is blinking in peace. He says no words. He needs none. The bells ring softly, and the cellar grows warmer, though the fire has not changed. Sleep lives here, not in beds, but in bottles, not in dreams, but in the fingers of an old man who remembers how to slow time, how to listen, and how to wait. And as the feather returns to its stand, and the fire folds inward, and the ink dries, in silence we leave the alchemist just as we found him, breathing slowly, writing gently, whispering with his silver feather to the quiet night. Now breathe again. Feel your body grow heavier, as if warm blankets of moss were being laid softly across your shoulders. Let your mind settle like dusk, settling into the corners of a forest clearing. You are still with the alchemist, still in that quiet room of shadow and glow, still safe, still drifting. The potion is ready now, a soft silver swirl, resting, not cold, but glowing gently from within, like the memory of moonlight reflecting in still water. The alchemist holds it carefully, his fingers trembling only slightly. He walks with care across the cellar, past jars filled with crushed star, anise, past strings of dried orange peel and sleepy yarrow blossoms. His footsteps make no sound. The stone floor beneath him seems to cradle each step like an old friend. At the far end of the room is a little wooden door, barely wider than his shoulders. It leads not outside, but to a stairwell, so narrow that only shadows seem to fit it properly. The alchemist begins his slow ascent, one step, then another, each footfall measured and quiet. He has taken this path hundreds of times, yet each time feels like the first snow falling on warm ground, gentle and full of wonder above him. The house rests in its evening hush. The embers in the upstairs hearth have settled into a soft glow, casting patterns across the rug like fireflies made of thread. A kettle on the iron hook sighs as it cools. A cat lifts its head for a moment, blinks slowly, and lays it back down without sound. The alchemist opens the door to the outside, and the night greets him like an old song. Cool air kisses his face, carrying the scent of damp grass applewood, smoke, and something older, something green and quiet. He steps out into the garden, overgrown and humming with gentle energy. Moonflowers curl open beneath the starlight, soft white petals glowing faintly like lanterns lost in a dream. Tiny snails make slow pilgrimages along mossy stones. Dewdrops cling to every leaf like the sky has shared a secret. He moves without a lantern. He does not need one. The path is known to his feet. It winds behind the house, past the old beekeeper's cottage long overtaken by ivy, past the wishing well with its crooked handle, and into the forest. This forest is not loud. There are no howls, no crunching branches, only the rustle of leaves whispering lullabies to one another, and the soft flutter of night wings. Owl's moths may be something more ancient. Hidden between tree roots and moonbeams, the stump is waiting, just as it always does, round and smooth, half covered in lichen. A small hollow carved into its heart, just large enough for the birchwood bowl. He kneels slowly, setting the bowl inside the stump. And as he does, the forest holds its breath just for a moment, just long enough for even the stars to take notice. He places a single dried petal beside it. Moonflower, soft, fragile, a final ingredient for whoever drinks this silver sleep. Then he rises, dusts the earth gently from his hands, and bows. His head, not as ritual, but as respect for whoever receives his gift. As he walks back toward the house, he does not turn to look behind him. He never does. He believes dreams do not like to be seen. Coming or going, they are like birds, graceful only when left untouched inside. He returns to the cellar, back to the glow of the fire and the comfort of stone. He sits once more in his chair, picks up his silver feather, and begins to write again. This time, he writes not a recipe, but a memory of the first time he saw the silver feather shimmer. It had fallen from a bird that did not flap its wings, but floated, glided across a foggy morning sky. Its eyes were like stars, its cry like the ringing of glass touched by wind. The feather had landed at his feet as he walked through the meadow. Still a young man, still full of questions, he had picked it up. And somehow from that day his writing had never again been hurried, never again been sloppy. Each letter flowed like music. Each potion brewed with it had worked softly, gently, as if the feather carried not just ink, but peace. Tonight, as he finishes recording the memory, he smiles softly. A gentle ache moves it. It is the ache of a life well used, a life spent in stillness and subtlety. He sets the feather down once more and blows gently on the ink, watching it dry into silver threads across the parchment. Outside an owl hoots, once long and low, and from the forest's edge. He closes his book, leans back in his chair, and lets his eyes flutter closed for just a moment. Just long enough to feel the fire's warmth on his face. Just long enough to hear the quiet gurgle of a sleeping bottle nearby. And now, as you listen, as you breathe, in this moment, you too may feel that same stillness, the hush of forgotten knowledge, the gentle power of sleep, well crafted, and the comfort of knowing that somewhere deep in a forest, or just beneath your dreams, the alchemist still writes, still believes in the soft kind of magic. Close your eyes now, if they aren't already closed. Feel your arms melt into the surface beneath you, as though you are becoming one with the bed or couch or wherever you rest. Imagine the warmth of woolen sleeves, the scent of parchment and rain, and the hush of a world built from whispers. And wonder, our story tonight continues within walls of stone and silence, where the alchemist walks the corridors of an ancient underground library. Beneath his cottage, beneath the roots of the forest, beneath even the river's dreaming current, he steps softly, carrying only a brass lantern lit with a violet flame. It makes no smoke, no heat, just a gentle glow that never flickers. The light dances on damp stone walls, on wooden shelves, bowed under the weight of knowledge, and on books whose covers breathe ever so slightly, as though the words inside are still alive. The library is not large, but it is deep. A spiral staircase leads down into the earth's past carvings of crescent moons, past runes, etched in languages no longer spoken, and past bells. Small brass bells that chime without wind, softly only when you pass. This is where the alchemist stores his oldest secrets, and his oldest sleep recipes written in ink made from crushed elderberries and rainwater. Caught on the spring equinox, bound in leather that smells of rosewood and cedar. These books do not sit in rows, they rest in clusters, on tables, in drawers, in the nooks. Between walls, like cats, curled up for warmth, he pauses before one such cluster, places the lantern on a low wooden stool, and lifts a book bound in blue velvet, its corners burnished with silver leaf. He opens it carefully, and the scent of lavender rises from the pages, a soft sigh, as though the book had waited centuries to breathe again. This book tells of lullabies from forgotten villages, of lullabies that were sung not in words, but in hums and tones carried through reeds and into the air like pollen. The alchemist hums one now, as he traces the script with his finger, a slow, gentle sound, rising and falling like the breath of a child at sleep. Behind him, the shelves seem to lean closer, as though they too want to hear. He turns the page, and there beneath a delicate sketch of a sleeping fox, he finds what he came for, a recipe called the silver feather tincture, older than his own memory, older perhaps than the very feather he uses to write it, begins not with ingredients but with intention. The page reads, "You must wish the dream for another more than you wish it for yourself." He closes the book, slowly bowing his head. His lips barely move, but if you listen closely, you might hear the words he whispers. "May the dream I give be warmer than the cold, deeper than the worry, softer than the ache of the day." He tucks the book into a leather satchel and turns to leave, but not before placing one small object on the shelf. A smooth stone, the color of dusk, etched with a spiral. It is how he thanks the library, not with coins, but with memories. Each stone holds one dream he no longer needs to keep as he ascends the spiral stair. The bells ring, once a low, comforting chime, and the walls seem to exhale back in the cellar. He sets the book upon the desk and opens to a fresh page. His hand reaches for the silver feather, and once more the ink flows like a dream turned into script. Tonight he will brew not just for the forest, but for someone else, someone he cannot see, but whom he senses a tired soul. Somewhere, far beyond the village, perhaps even outside time, he crushes moonflower petals carefully, one at a time, murmuring their names in a tone only they can hear. He adds 2 drops of rosemary oil, not 3, not 1, for balance is everything then, as he stirs the mixture clockwise. He recites the dreaming rhyme, a soft verse older than stone. Featherfall and starry skin, let the dreamers sleep begin. The liquid darkens to a twilight hue, like ink spilled in dusk, and a single bubble rises from its center, then disappears without a sound. He smiles, not with pride, but with peace, for this is his favorite part. The moment before the gift is given, the silence before sleep catches hold. He pours the tincture into a tiny glass vial, its surface engraved with a feather and a flame. He wraps it in cloth dyed with indigo and bound with threads spun from the threads of an old bedtime shawl. It is not meant to travel far, but it will, somehow, as all true sleep does. He places it by the door, next to the walking stick carved from elderwood, and the leather boots that still smell faintly of mint and dust. And now, as the hearth's last ember sighs and the stars peer gently through the windows, the alchemist finally allows himself to rest. He leans back once more, his eyes soft, his breath slow. And you, dear listener, you rest too. Float gently on the hush of brewing herbs, on the scent of candle wax and crushed lavender, on the hum of a story told slowly, as all good stories should be. Breathe softly. Now feel the weight of your limbs grow light, as if you're lying in a field of clouds. Let go of the noise. Let your thoughts float like feathers in an open sky. You are safe here, in this place of stillness and wonder, where stories drift like mist through tall trees, and even the wind speaks in a whisper. Our tale continues with morning light filtering through ivy-covered windows. The alchemist awakes not with a start, but as if unfolding from a long-held breath. His hands are still stained with lavender and soot, and his dreams are full of quiet blue fire. Today he will send a letter, not just any letter, but one written with a mixture of ash and violet ink. A letter meant not to be read, but to be felt, for in his village and in the old ways, some messages were made not for the eyes, but for the heart, softly coated with herbs, sealed with sleep wax, and written only at dawn. He chooses his parchment with care, not from a drawer, but from a tin box hidden beneath a cushion of pressed petals. Each page is made from mulberry pulp and river reeds, smooth to the touch and faintly shimmering with something more than light. He lays one flat on his table, breathes deeply, and dips the silver feather into his ink pot, the ink size, and for a moment you might hear it hum. The alchemist begins to write, not in sentences, but in symbols. Each curve, each dot is a note in an invisible lullaby. One line means hush, another means drift, and still another means you are not alone. He does not rush. Each stroke is slow and steady, like the rhythm of a heartbeat just before sleep. As the letter takes shape, the room fills with scent, a mix of crushed chamomile and cooling beeswax, soothing, like warm hands, pressing gently against your brow. When he finishes, he seals the letter with a touch of rose oil and a sprinkle of powdered mugwort. used since ancient times to ward off restless thoughts. He folds the parchment into thirds, places it into a pouch made of soft gray felt, and tucks inside a sliver of moonstone, not for weight, but to catch a trace of the dream that lingers in the ink. Then, without hurry, he steps outside into the morning. The forest greets him quietly with dew on every leaf and bird song barely louder than breath. He walks the old path, the one that leads to the drift. Post a crooked wooden box hung on a branch where the trees lean inward as if listening. Here is where dream letters are left taken, not by hand, but by wind. For those who know how to wait, the wind is a better messenger than any bird or man. He places the pouch inside, closes the box gently, and steps back. For a moment, nothing stirs. Then a single gust, cool, fragrant, with pine and morning rain, passes through. The box creaks softly, and when the alchemist opens it again, it is empty. Somewhere, perhaps many miles from here, the letter will arrive, unfold itself, and whisper in the heart of one who needs it most, back at home. He returns to his little cellar, not to mix or read, but to sit and simply listen. For the old ones believed that silence, true silence, was not the absence of sound, but the presence of peace. He sits with palms open, eyes half-lidded, and breathes in the quiet above him. The rafters hold in candle, soot, and tiny. Cobwebs glisten like starlight. He remembers the time long ago, when he was first shown the silver feather by a mentor whose name is now forgotten, but whose touch remains in every corner of this home. He had been just a boy, curious and clumsy, and he had asked, "Why is it silver and not gold, if it's meant for such important writing?" The old mentor had smiled and answered, "Because gold is too loud for dreams." And now, as years gather behind leaves, he understands there is power in gentleness, magic in small moments, and sleep in every slow breath. Outside, the sky begins to deepen again, shifting from blue to lilac, then to indigo, as stars prick gently into view. The alchemist lights his lantern once more, not because he needs it, but because its glow feels like company. And as the hush settles in again, he speaks softly, as if to the walls or to you. Though you are far tonight, there will be more writing, more brewing, but also rest, and in that rest, a feather will fall somewhere, unseen, landing softly on the dreams of someone who needs it most. You might feel it now, a hush in your chest, a softness behind your eyes, a slow smile from nowhere. That is how you know the story is still being written, even as you sleep. Let your shoulders melt into the mattress. Let your eyes rest like leaves on still water. Let the hush settle in your lungs, warm, easy, and full of space. You are not rushed, not watched, only held by the rhythm of a story as old as breath. Our story drifts now into another room of the alchemist's little home, and the earth itself smells sweet and damp. This is his brew house, not for ale, but for the gentle potions that whisper people to sleep. Tonight, he prepares a draught, a sleep potion made with moonflower, an herb that only opens under moonlight, its pale petals catching silver with every breeze. He gathers the blossoms one by one, barefoot. On the soft soil, each flower cupped gently in his hand, as if it were made of breath and silk. He does not speak, for sleep draughts are delicate, and even words can cloud their dreaming. Back inside, he lays the moonflowers on linen, arranged like stars across a night sky. Then he collects the other ingredients: rainwater caught during a thunderless storm, lavender petals, dried in shade, and a single feather from a barn owl's malt. Each item holds a meaning, a feeling, a place in the world between waking and rest. Into a rounded pot of blue clay he pours. The rainwater first listens to the soft plink as it touches the warm bottom. He adds the lavender with slow fingers, watching it spin gently on the surface like boats with no destination. The moonflowers are last, and as they touch the water, a soft blue glow rises, just for a moment, as if the flowers remember the sky. He stirs with the owl feather, not fast, but in a lazy spiral, letting the silence seep deeper into the room. And then he waits. The brew must sit for 7 breaths long, full and unhurried. During this time, he hums a tune with no name, only notes that fall like soft rain on glass. The potion changes slowly from clear to misty, until it looks like milk touched by starlight. He pours it carefully into glass vials, the same ones he blew by hand years ago in a time of heartbreak, when he learned that sleep was sometimes the only kindness left. Each vial is stoppered with beeswax infused with sage smoke and wrapped in cloth so soft it barely exists. He stores them in a drawer made from driftwood, one that smells faintly of the sea. Though it's never left the valley, these draughts he does not sell. He gives them to those who cannot name their sorrow, those who walk too long before lying down, or those who speak too much to fill the silence. 1 vial per hand. He delivers them without footsteps, without notes, sometimes leaving them at doorsteps, sometimes tucked into windowsills or under pillows. Like a secret waiting to be remembered tonight, he chooses only one home, a woman who lives on the far edge of the village, with a garden that never blooms, and a cat who never purrs. He has heard her through the walls, not crying, but quiet, in a way that aches. So he slips through the trees, a ghost of herbs and soft boots, and leaves the vial beside her wooden chair, the one she never rocks anymore. Then he walks home, not with pride, but with the peace that comes from doing something small and gentle and unseen. When he returns, he does not light a lamp, but sits in the dark, with a cup of warmed oat milk and the soft sound of the fire dying down. He writes in his journal, not with ink, but with pressed flowers, one per line, telling stories in the only language dreams truly understand. A petal of moonflower means, I hope you rest tonight. A stem of rosemary means, you are remembered. A curl of sweetgrass means, let go. And a smudge of soot means, I'm still here. He folds the journal, closed, sets it beneath the cushion of his chair, and lets his own eyes fall into the hush. The room smells of lavender and earth, and the silver feather lies still, its tip catching the last flicker of firelight. Up above, through the tiny window in the ceiling, a single star winks, and beneath it the alchemist sleeps not quickly, but with a depth that has no bottom. He will dream of rivers and turning pages, and the sound of glass cooling under the touch of night air. Breathe in slow, feel your chest rise like mist over still water. Let the hush curl around your ears like a shawl of soft-spoken silence and rest. Tonight, our story does not rush. It tiptoes gently through the winding hours of the alchemist's twilight thoughts. When morning stirs, not bright, but in a pale stretch across the hills, he wakes to the sound of doves cooing near his windowsill. He does not open his eyes at once, but listens as if weighing the shape of the world by sound alone. Then slowly he sits up, wrapping a shawl of green wool across his shoulders, and lights a small stick of sage. The smoke, curling like sleepy thoughts, rising in the mind. He places a parchment on his table, a fine sheet made from linen fiber, and dips his silver feather not in ink today, but in a mixture of crushed violets and ash. This is his letter-writing ritual. But he sends no words to kings, no commands or requests. He writes messages into the air, not for anyone's eyes, but for the world to hold in its quiet pockets. His feather strokes the page, but nothing shows, at least not to most eyes. Yet when the breeze hits just right, when the sun kisses the surface just so, the invisible words shimmer for an instant before folding back into silence. The first message reads, I saw you in my dream again, laughing near the salt fountain, and I did not feel alone. The second, my garden has grown a single mint leaf in the corner where no sun reaches. Perhaps sorrow can grow sweet. He lets each page dry in the warmth of a clay tile, then hangs them with tiny clothespins across the hearth. They flutter when the door opens like birds preparing to speak. Outside the village begins to stir chickens, cluck softly in wooden pens. Bread ovens roar to life, and water splashes from pumps into waiting pails. But the alchemist does not join the bustle. Instead, he tends to his herbs, walking barefoot in the dew-soaked garden. He whispers to the lavender softly, thanking it for last night's strength and kisses. The leaf of a plantain herb, which has healed a dozen scraped knees this week alone. Then, beneath a canopy of drooping apple branches, he finds a small package left for him. It is wrapped in silk dyed with crushed berries and tied with golden twine. Inside, he finds only one thing: a feather, not silver, but gold, light as hope, and unfamiliar. He holds it gently, his thumb brushing its quill, and feels a small pulse within it, like a forgotten word waiting to be spoken. He places it beside his silver feather, and for a moment they hum together, not with memory. Back inside, he prepares tea with crushed apple peel and nettle leaf steam curling into the shape of old lullabies. He sits by the hearth, holding the golden feather, and remembers the stories told to him long ago by another alchemist. Now long returned to the stars, she had said, when you find a feather that hums, you are being asked to listen, not speak. So he does. He listens to the hiss of the fire, the creak of wood as it settles, the sigh of the wind outside his shutters. And slowly he begins to understand the feather is not from this world, not entirely. It has seen a sky he has never touched and dreams he has not yet brewed. He places it in a cup of moon water, just as the sky begins to shift again into late afternoon. Outside, children chase each other with ribbons, and a dog barks at its own echo. While inside, the alchemist's fingers glow faintly as he holds his silver feather to the parchment once more. Tonight, he will write a different kind of letter, one not made for paper, but for dreams themselves. He will ink it with starlight and fold it into the breath of a sleeping crow to be carried. Beyond the edge of knowing, it will begin like this to whoever walks with soft feet and watches stars from rooftops. I see you. You are made of wonder still, even if no one says it aloud. He smiles as he writes, not wide, but deep. The kind of smile only seen in dreams you forget by morning. And when he finishes, he does not seal the letter, but lets it drift into the smoke above his hearth, where it curls, disappears, and waits to be found. The silver feather rests again on the table, its tip stained with violet ash and the golden. One glows faintly in the bowl of moon water, whispering softly to the silence. And so, as evening lowers its voice, and shadows stretch like cats across the stones, the alchemist closes his eyes once more. The house holds him like a memory, gentle, quiet, unafraid. The wind hums a lullaby outside the shutters, and inside the air smells of sage and blooming thyme, and in his dream he walks across clouds of lavender with feathers tucked behind each ear, ready to listen forever. Let your shoulders rest. Let the space behind your eyes soften. Let the air curl around you like a woolen blanket warmed by sunlit stone. Let go. Our story drifts deeper now into evening, into stillness, into that slow, weightless time when the sky turns from gold to pewter. The alchemist wakes not to an alarm, but to the soft chime of wind bells woven from hollow bones and beads of colored glass. Each one tuned to the breath of night itself, he rises and opens the shutters wide, letting the scent of crushed rosemary and fresh loam spill into the room. Outside, the moon sits heavy and round, glowing like a bell jar turned upside down, its light trapping the dreams of the world beneath it. Tonight, he prepares a potion not meant to heal nor reveal, but simply to dream. He grinds valerian root, soft as dry clouds, then adds a single petal of moonflower, harvested under a whisper in the mortar. He mixes these with a few drops of melted beeswax and a dash of honey. Wine left to ferment in the hollow of a pear. The mixture hums, not with sound, what with warmth, like a held hand or a memory rediscovered. He pours it into a clear phial, stoppers it with a cork carved in the shape of a feather, and places it in the hearth's glow. Then he settles onto his stool and turns his gaze toward the great leather-bound book on the shelf, one he has not opened in many moons. Its cover smells of cedar smoke and long-faded ink. Its pages rustle like autumn leaves beneath soft boots. He flips slowly until he reaches a drawing, an old diagram of a feather dipped in starlight. It is labeled "Only Whisper, Quill," and beside it, a short note written in a hand not his own. The one who writes with this shall never be forgotten, so long as breath moves in sleep. The alchemist traces the lines with a reverent finger. His eyes half closed, he remembers when he first found the silver feather, half buried in snow near the broken sundial, and how the snow had not melted where it lay, but sparkled like glass. He remembers the bell tones it made when stirred, the way it seemed to write with the voice of the wind, now with the golden feather resting nearby. He wonders if the two are not halves of the same dream, split across time like a fallen star. Outside, a fox slips past the garden gate, pausing to sniff the herbs. Before continuing its silent journey, the alchemist smiles and reaches for a slip of parchment. This one, thinner than the others, barely more than mist pressed between leaves. He writes, "My name is not mine, but I carry it kindly in case someone calls it one day." Then he ties the note to a thread of spider silk and sets it afloat on a spoon-shaped leaf down the small stream that curves behind his cottage, somewhere, perhaps in another garden. Someone will wake with those words on their tongue and not know why. Back inside the room has cooled, and the embers in the hearth now glow low and amber red. He places the silver feather between two stones to warm it gently, so it may remember the touch of fire. And beside it, he lays a pinch of dried thyme and the petals of 3 blue cornflowers, there scent a lullaby he once heard sung by a mother to her sleepy child. The alchemist does not speak much these days, but his silence is not empty. It is full, like the hush between raindrops or the moment before a lantern is lit. In that hush, he remembers something, it's long forgotten, a dream where the stars were arranged, not in constellations, but in words, and someone was reading them, aloud in a voice made of wind chimes and snowfall. The words were not sharp or loud, but soft, slow, like the way tree roots speak. If given centuries, he stands and steps outside onto the cool earth barefoot, each blade of grass greeting him with dewdrop kisses. Above the bell jar, moon watches still and round, and he bows slightly to it, not in worship, but in understanding. In his hand he carries both feathers, silver in the left, gold in the right. He raises them to the sky, and for a moment they catch the moonlight and glow with a light that does not blind but calms. And then, as the breeze rises, they hum together once more, a sound like a memory of singing, soft, low, safe. The alchemist returns inside, places the feathers in a wooden box lined with lamb's wool and seals it with a thread of lavender stalk. He whispers, "Rest, now you've remembered enough for tonight." Then he sips from the dream potion, eyes heavy, body light, and slowly, gently, like a petal returning to its branch, he leans back into the velvet embrace of slumber. Breathe in softly, like the way mist rises from warm soil just after dawn. Breathe out slowly, as though your breath carries the hush of ancient trees. Let your hands fall still. Let your thoughts slip into the river beside the alchemist's home, drifting gently. No need to swim, no need to steer, just float. Our story moves now to the garden, not the visible one, fenced in by low stones, but the older garden, the one behind the veil where forgotten herbs bloom only in moonlight, and each plant has a story of its own. The alchemist walks barefoot across the moss, carrying a small woven basket, its bottom lined with soft cotton and its sides whispering with the weight of time. He passes thyme that never withers, mint that only grows beneath our feathers, and a vine of honeysuckle that glows when someone nearby remembers love at the farthest corner where the stones are half sunk in loam. He stops at a low plant with round silver leaves, the edges slightly curled like parchment dipped in salt water. It is called featherwort, and it blooms only when a feather has been used in truth. Its petals shift colors: pale blue for dreams, deep violet for memory, white for release. He kneels, not hurried, not urgent, and plucks only one bloom, placing it in the basket beside a folded square of beeswax wrap. Then he hums, just one note, barely louder than breath. But the whole garden listens, and, in return, each leaf seems to lean toward him. He speaks softly, not in words, but in shapes of meaning, things, gratitude. And the garden responds with stillness, a hush like snowfall. Even the wind waits. In the far left patch, beneath a curling arch of willow, a vine called moonthread slowly unwraps itself from a piece of bone and releases a tiny blossom that smells faintly of cinnamon and earth. This flower, called morning glace, blooms only when someone remembers a goodbye they never got to say. The alchemist does not touch this one. Instead, he bows his head and sets a candle in the soil beside it, its flame catching the air like breath returned. From his sleeve, he retrieves a slip of silk and wraps the featherwort bloom, gently laying it over a bed of dried lemon balm and crushed violet stem. It is not a spell, not exactly, but a ritual of soft closure, a way to mark that something is being understood, even if not spoken aloud. He walks slowly back toward the house, not because he is tired, but because the garden's rhythm is not his to rush. Each step on the moss is like pressing into warm memory, a softness that welcomes without pulling. Inside, the cottage holds its warmth, close like a cat curled near the hearth. The silver and gold feathers remain still, but their hum lingers faintly in the air, a presence, not a sound. He lights a smaller candle, this one pale green, molded with rosemary oil and bits of calendula, and places it on the shelf, beside a small wooden figure of a badger holding a bell. This candle is for clarity, to welcome dreams that explain rather than confuse, to guide. Sleep like a gentle lantern. Through unfamiliar woods, he sits and pulls out a leather-bound journal, its edges worn, its spine stitched with silver thread. Inside, there are no words, only drawing soft sketches in charcoal and chalk plants, feathers, small animals, stars. On one page, a detailed image of a sleeping fox with the word stillness written below in pale ink. On another, a curling vine wrapping around a spoon, captioned comfort in smallest things. He adds a new drawing, the featherwort bloom, its colors remembered by His hand, and beneath it, he writes, only opens when the heart does too. He sighs, not in sadness, but in release, a breath that leaves space behind. Then he sets the journal aside and pours himself a cup of warm nettle milk, sweetened with honey and dusted with crushed cardamom. Each sip feels like a hand on the back, steady, quiet, safe. The moon hangs high now, a soft mirror in the sky, and the wind carries the scent of lavender and hay. He lies down, not in bed, but on a woven mat near the hearth, his head resting on a cushion filled with pine shavings and rose petals. And as he closes his eyes, he hears the faintest sound, like ink drying on parchment, or the final chime of a bell long since stilled. He does not move, only smiles, and lets the silence gather him like arms around a child. Tonight he will dream, not of visions or secrets, but of gentle things, a path of moss beneath his feet, a candle that never burns, too bright, a silver feather floating down into a cup of warm tea. And you, listening now, you may rest too, for the air is soft, the garden waits, and nothing is expected of you but to breathe. Now let your breathing soften, feel the hush settle over your shoulders like a shawl woven from starlight and quiet leaves. Feel the weight of the day gently lifting from your chest, nothing pulling, nothing pushing, just stillness. Our story now continues just before the hour of still bells, that sacred moment deep in the night, when even the mice pause and the wind whispers sideways between the eaves. It's a time the alchemist always honors, not with ceremony, but with attention. He sits by the round window, again, the same place where the moon once bathed his silver feather in light. But tonight there is no writing, no stirring of ink, just watching. The stars hang like drops of slow silver, and the trees in the distance sway with a rhythm that feels older than time, a lullaby passed down from one forest to the next. He cups his hands over a small crystal sphere, the kind once used by traveling apothecaries to read the energy of herbs, not for magic, but for understanding. The sphere glows faintly, not from within, but from the reflection of thought and breath, his own and the world's. It's time to prepare a dream letter, a special ritual he performs once a month, when the stars align in a spiral pattern that mimics the shape of a curled feather. He opens a wooden drawer lined with soft gray felt. Inside are slips of parchment, no wider than a ribbon, no longer than a fallen leaf, each one scented with a different herb. This time he selects one laced with chamomile and crushed lavender blossom. He places the parchment beneath his feather, not to write, but to allow the feather to rest upon it, as if passing the memory of flight or the feeling of quiet knowledge into the page. No words are needed, yet only presence. As the candle flickers low, he begins humming a slow, winding note, barely a melody, almost more breath than tune. It's a song from the monastery garden from long ago, when he was a boy sweeping dried leaves from stone paths, and the old monks would sing to the herbs before harvest, not to bless them, but to say thank you. That same hum now wraps the room in invisible thread, pulling the shadows closer, but gentler, inviting them in like friendly cats at dusk. On the shelf behind him, a bell chimes, not because of wind, but because the hour has come, the hour of still bells. He stands and places a blue glass bottle on the floor. Inside is not liquid, but scent, the essence of midnight moss, harvested beneath full moons and distilled over cypress fire. He lets the scent fill the room, subtle, cool. The way dreams smell before you remember them. He places both hands over the feather, then lifts it, slowly dipping its tip into a tiny ink pot filled with moon water, gathered weeks earlier from a stone basin deep in the forest. The ink does not mark the page, not visibly, but still he writes. A letter without lines, a message written in memory and intent. And though you cannot see the words, you can feel what they say. They speak of forgiveness, of rest, of the kind of peace that is earned not through effort, but through letting go. Once the message is complete, he folds the ribbon-like parchment in thirds, ties it with a thread of golden twine, and sets it in a wooden bowl beside the hearth, where other dream letters rest ready to be carried by whatever dreams pass through the chimney. The fire has gone quiet now. Not cold, just steady embers, glowing like little eyes that blink slowly content. He pours himself a final cup of balm. Tea this one, brewed with lemon verbena rosehip, and just a breath of cinnamon. Each sip feels like the touch of warm cloth on cool skin, soothing, steadfast home. Outside, the night deepens its blackness, soft and velvet-like, not empty, just wide welcoming. He takes his tea to bed, which is not a bed in the usual way, but a deep wooden nook lined with moss-stuffed quilts, feather pillows, and a small, plush figure of a crow wearing spectacles before settling in. He sprinkles a few dried petals onto the floor, a mix of blue, cornflower, and red clover. They're not meant for ritual, just for scent and the gentle. Crunch underfoot in the morning, a way to wake, remembering that dreams leave traces. He climbs into the nook, pulls the blankets around him, and places the feather under his pillow, a tradition. So old, he doesn't remember who first told him to do it, only that it works, and has always worked. Underneath his eyelids, the stars begin to move, not in the sky, but inside, little pulses of light, drifting gently across the darkness of sleep. And somewhere between the flicker of candle and the hush of pillows, the silver feather hums so softly. It's not a sound, but a sensation, like remembering the scent of someone you once loved, or the weight of a book you've read too many times to count. You, dear listener, you are here to not watching, not waiting, just drifting in the warmth of the hearth, in the garden's forgotten breath, in the hum of feathers and bells. You may rest now, no more turning, no more searching. Oh, just stillness and breath and the peace of a story that asks nothing of you but to be here. Let yourself settle again, wherever you are. Feel the softness beneath you, the hush around you, as if your whole body were wrapped in the velvet edge of night, safe, still weightless. Our story drifts forward, now not in time, but in memory, through the scented folds of the alchemist's dreams, guided by the silver feather. Resting beneath his pillow tonight, he dreams of the Moonflower Dream Book, an ancient volume that only appears when the stars align in the shape of a sleeping owl, a book that cannot be found on shelves or in libraries, but rather appears in your hands when the soul is ready to read it. In his dream, the alchemist stands in a meadow of glowing moonflowers, tall and pale, their petals opening only to the stars. They sway in rhythm with his breath, and the ground beneath his feet pulses like a heartbeat, slow, strong, eternal. The dream book appears before him, bound in soft green leather that feels more like leaf than hide. Its pages shimmer like mica, each one handwritten in a script that changes shape each time it's read. He opens it slowly with reverence, a shell, the way one opens an old music box or unfolds a message found inside. The first page shows a drawing of his silver feather, but in the dream book, the feather is still attached to a bird, a great white heron with eyes like dusk and talons wrapped in vines. It does not speak, but nods, as if acknowledging a truth the alchemist already knows. As he turns the pages, the book reveals forgotten dreams, not just his, but those of the herbs in his cellar, the stones in his fireplace, the dust on his windowsill. Each dream is quiet, wordless, and warm, like a lullaby hummed by the earth itself. One page reveals a map, not of roads, but of moments. Each dot on the map glows with a memory of a kindness shared, a cup of tea poured for a stranger, a song hummed to a nervous cat, a letter written but never sent. He traces the map with his fingertip, and as he does, a warm wind flows through the dream, carrying the scent of moonflower and lavender, a blend so calming it feels like a memory of being held. He hears a voice, then, not his own, not the birds, but the dream book's. It whispers, not in words, but in sensation, a soft urging to rest, to remember that even in sleep one is growing. The alchemist closes the book, not with finality, but with peace, knowing he can return whenever he needs to. The meadow dims, not with darkness, but with that soft fade of starlight before dawn, like the exhale after a deep breath. And slowly he drifts upward, back through the layers of sleep, through the velvet dark, through the scent of moss and ash, back into his body still curled in the nook, blanketed by time. He wakes before the sun, not startled, but aware. He listens to the quiet, the kind of quiet that has texture like silk over stone. He rises slowly, his joints creaking like old wooden drawers, his breath steady as a tide pool on the windowsill, to catch the first light of dawn, then lights a tiny sprig of rosemary, letting the smoke curl upward in thanks. In his notebook he writes one word, moonflower, and places a small pressed petal beside it, a keepsake from his dream. Then he smiles, not broadly, but the kind of smile one wears when everything makes quiet sense. He steps outside barefoot onto the dew-damp grass and feels the world waking slowly, softly, as if it too had just visited the dream book. A crow calls from a nearby branch, not calling but murmuring, and the alchemist lifts his hand in greeting, knowing that the language of a morning is made of gestures and breath, not noise. He walks to the edge of the garden where the wild herbs grow in circular beds, chamomile, fennel sleepgrass, and moonwort, each one swaying just slightly in the breeze. He kneels and places both hands into the soil, feeling the cold, dark earth embrace his skin. A grounding, a homecoming, a reminder that roots and dreams are not so different. Behind him, his cottage stands silent, holding his stories, his sleep, his silver feather, and far above, the last of the night stars shimmer once, then fade, not gone, just resting. And so, dear listener, as you lie here, still wrapped in the hush of our tale, know that you, too, carry a dream book, bound not in leather, but in memory. Each night, when you sleep, its pages turn, revealing things yet to bloom. So rest easy now. The ink has dried, the candle has cooled, and the feather glows. Take a soft breath in and let it out slowly, like a breeze slipping through linen curtains. The night is gentle around you, and your thoughts are soft as dandelion seeds. Let yourself drift once more into the hush of our story. Let your muscles loosen your heartbeat. Slow your senses turn inward as we return to the alchemist's quiet world. Our story tonight begins in the nearby town of Belmar, a cobbled village just over the low blue hills where fog gathers like stories not yet told, and the rooftops lean gently toward one another, as if whispering secrets. It is a place known for one thing, its lanterns, handmade by a quiet woman with ash-gray hair and a voice like the inside of a seashell. Her name is Idra, and her lanterns don't just glow, they guide dreams. Each one is made from beaten brass, smoothed with river stones, and shaped while the village sleeps. Idra works by starlight, her small hands moving steadily through silence. Inside, each lantern, a tiny piece of moon glass, is set behind a flame. This rare glass is said to be made from sand, struck by starlight and cooled by owl breath. Its shimmer is not bright, but deep like the bottom of a still lake. The alchemist visits her rarely, but tonight. He walks the winding path into Belmar, his silver feather tucked inside his sleeve and his lantern unlit. When he reaches her little cottage, the windows are glowing with golden warmth and the scent of cardamom, and beeswax lingers on the doorstep. She does not ask why he's come, only gestures toward a seat beside the hearth. He nods, his joints settling into the old wooden chair, and from the fire's glow, he watches as she finishes shaping a lantern. Its frame is soft square, its glass round like a pond, and the handle is wrapped in silver thread. When she speaks, it's as if her words drift on steam. "This one is for silence," she says, "for those who cannot fall asleep because of the noise in their own heads." The alchemist nods, his eyes full of firelight. He pulls the silver feather from his sleeve and sets it gently beside the lantern. She picks it up with 2 fingers, not to keep, but to feel, as if sensing the dreams. It's already carried. Then she asks, "What have you forgotten to remember?" And he answers, "A name that belongs to no one, but means everything." She places the feather on her workbench, lights a new flame, and begins grinding lavender petals into dust, mixing them with beeswax, and placing a pinch inside the base of the lantern. The scent lifts slowly, curling into the air like a lullaby with no tune. As they sit together, no more words pass between them, only the soft tap of metal, the low hum of breath, and the tiny sigh of candlelight. When the lantern is finished, she places it in the alchemist's hands. It feels warm, alive, as though it remembers every hour it took to be born. "This lantern," she says, "will not chase away the dark, but soften it like fog softens the edge of a mountain." He bows his head, a gesture of thanks, and turns to leave. Outside, the stars are dimming, and the sky is the color of wet slate. A light mist has begun to fall, each droplet catching the lantern's warm glow. As he walks back home, he holds the lantern low, watching how its glow makes the stones on the path look like polished bones. The trees nod as he passes, and the river hums, a soft music only the very sleepy can hear by the time he returns to the cottage. Dawn is brushing the horizon with pale gold. He hangs the lantern beside the door, where its light touches the herbs drying above the lintel. Inside, he writes in his notebook, "Lantern of Silence, Idra." Moonglass and lavender, and places the entry beneath a leaf of pressed sage. He sips a tiny cup of warmed milk and sits in his favorite chair, the one with the curved arms and the blanket draped like a memory. His eyes drift to the new lantern, and he listens, not for sound, but for absence. The beautiful hush between thoughts outside a breeze slips through the meadow, carrying the scent of jasmine and earth, and inside, the alchemist closes his eyes. His breathing slows. The lines of his face soften, and the silver feather, still resting on his desk, shimmers once, then stills, and all around him the world sighs. Welcome back, gentle dreamer. Let your eyelids soften your jaw, unclench your hands, rest like petals on still water. Breathe in the hush, the gentle kind of quiet that comes when the fire has died low and only glowing embers remain beneath the ashes. Tonight, we find ourselves once more in the alchemist's cottage, where the lantern of silence glows by the door, casting soft reflections onto the stone floor. The alchemist sleeps, his breaths slow, even deep, as roots beneath the garden outside. But somewhere in the early light, just before the sun has fully risen, the silver feather begins to stir. It doesn't move far, just a soft shift like a single snowflake, caught on a breath, and then, from the end of its quill, a tiny shimmer pulses and disappears. Akoma stirs in his sleep, not waking, but turning his head ever so slightly toward the desk where the feather lies beside his book of dreams. A voice, soft as wind, passing through lace whispers inside his mind, returned to the flame. Later that day, as the sun filters down through branches thick with midsummer leaves, the alchemist walks to the far side of the forest to a forgotten clearing where the old hearth circle stands. This was once the gathering place of the circle of five, a fellowship of seekers and sages who believe that fire was the oldest truth, the first storyteller, the one who remembers even when we forget. The hearthstones are covered in moss now, and ferns curl between the cracks, but when the alchemist steps into the ring, the air becomes very still. He kneels, placing the silver feather on the central stone, and around it arranges 5 herbs: rosemary for memory, lavender for peacetime, for courage, sage for wisdom, mugwort for dreaming. He lights a small fire, just a spark at first, nursed gently with dry grass and old birch bark, until a low flame curls upward. And then, with both hands, he lifts the feather and passes it slowly through the smoke. It takes on a faint glow, and the fire flickers as if in greeting the alchemist, speaks softly, not aloud, but in the language of intention, of breath, of memory, carried on the wind. He asks the flame to awaken what lies sleeping, not in the world, but within himself. And the flame answers not in words, but in feeling a warmth that curls around his ribs and settles behind his eyes. He sees a vision. Then, clear and bright as moonlight on water, a child, perhaps 10 years old, sits beside a tall figure cloaked in moss green. The child holds a feather, this feather, and writes into the dirt circles and stars and curious symbols. The tall figure laughs gently and leans down to whisper. The world remembers those who listen with more than their ears. The vision fades, but not the feeling. The alchemist knows then that the feather came to him not by accident, but by return. It had once been his, long before the forgetting, long before he became the man others now call the quiet one. He wraps the feather in a square of blue velvet, ties it with silver thread, and places it gently in the satchel beside his heart. The fire has burned down, but the smoke rises, still a single soft trail, twisting into the sky like a lullaby. Without words, he does not speak again, but leaves the clearing with lighter steps and a quiet smile that reaches the corners of his eyes. That night, he lights the lantern of silence again and opens a fresh page in his dream book in careful strokes. He writes, "The feather was mine not by ownership, but by return. The fire remembers. And I once again have begun to remember too." He closes the book, sips a cup of warm clover tea, and leans back in his chair. Outside, the wind hushes through the leaves, and the stars blink slowly as if dozing mid-sentence. Inside, the alchemist's breath evens out, and sleep comes not like a fall, but like a feather drifting downward. The silver one rests beside him, glowing faintly with something not quite fire, not quite light, but closer to knowing. And all around the cottage listens, and the forest listens, and far away the memory of fire leans closer. Welcome back, sweet soul. Let your shoulders drop, and your breath come slowly, as if each inhale were drawn from a meadow at dusk. Tonight, the wind carries us softly to the garden behind the alchemist's cottage, a place not just of plants, but of memory and murmurs of dreams that bloom even when no one is watching. The alchemist rises with the mist, a light fog curling around his boots as he steps barefoot through dew-kissed grass. He carries with him a wooden tray, on it a bowl of clear spring water, a sprig of rosemary, a single petal from the moonflower vine, and tucked safely in a bundle of soft cloth, the silver feather. He walks to the oldest part of the garden, where a wild violet cluster beneath the hedgerow, and the stone path disappears beneath thyme and moss. There, nestled between two ancient rose bushes, is a small ring of stones. Adreamed this circle is not for vegetables, nor for herbs used in medicine, but for those plants that grow best when sung to at night, when spoken to with lullabies instead of orders, when watered with stories and warmed by starlight. He kneels beside the dreamed and begins to whisper, not in any language known to the ear, but in the gentle hum of heartbeats and leaf breath. He dips the silver feather into the bowl of spring water and lets a single drop fall onto the soil. The earth hums back, not loudly, but like the soft sigh of roots waking from sleep. Then, using the feather like a brush, he draws a spiral into the dirt, a shape that turns inward, a soft invitation to dream within the spiral, and buries the rosemary sprig beneath it, not as a burial, but as a beginning. And as he finishes, he feels the first hint of warmth, not from the sun, but from beneath the soil itself. The garden, it seems, is dreaming back for the next hour. He sits in stillness, letting the sounds of morning blend with the scents of sage and mint, a symphony of hush. Bees buzz past, not hurried, but as if in slow dance, and sparrows rustle in the hedges with sleepy chirps. The feather glows faintly beside him, its silver catching soft gold from the rising light. And then something shifts from the center of the spiral. A tiny green sprout pushes upward, too small to be seen, unless you are very still and very quiet. The alchemist smiles, not surprised, but deeply pleased. He knows what this is, a dream seed taking root. You see, in ancient times, it was believed that some gardens held more than food. They held memories, and when tended gently, those memories would bloom again, as scent, as color, as feeling. This sprout, this tiny curl of green, is not just a plant, but the beginning of a forgotten thought, returning a moment lived long ago, perhaps by someone else, perhaps by him, or perhaps simply waiting to become. He does not speak, only watches and feels the rhythm of the soil in his bones. Later, as the sun rises higher, he stands, gathers the feather, and walks slowly back to the cottage. Inside, the kettle hums gently on the hearth, and he pours a small cup of nettle tea infused with lemon balm, cooling his palms against the ceramic before sipping. He opens his book of dreams and writes the garden dreams again, not with eyes, but with roots, not with breath, but with bloom. And I, who had forgotten how to listen, am learning the silence between petals. That evening, when the stars begin to blink and the lantern of silence flickers to life, he returns to the garden once more. The sprout is taller now, though only by a finger's length, and a soft shimmer clings to its leaves, as if the moon herself had wept joyfully on it. He does not touch it, only sits beside it and hums a tune from long ago, a lullaby that once soothed his sister to sleep when they were children in a cottage by the northern hills. The melody drifts up through the rosemary, over the thyme, through the spiraled path, and settles like warm rain on the dreaming leaves. And somewhere deep in the soil, the garden smiles. The silver feather rests in his lap, its tip warm from being held. Its magic quiet, but alive. In that hush, in that soft light, the world forgets its noise. And the alchemist, the listener, the writer, the dream gardener, leans his head against the stone wall and drifts into sleep beneath the stars. The night holds him gently like an old friend, and the silver feather gleams softly beside his folded hands. Close your eyes and take a long, soft breath, as if you were sipping moonlight through a reed straw. Let the quiet gather behind. Your ears like velvet curtains being drawn, and feel the air become gentler around you, warmer as though it remembers something sweet. Tonight, we return to the alchemist's cottage, where something stirs gently in the glass bottles on the shelf, and the feather has begun to glow with a cooler light, like silver touched with frost. The dream garden sleeps peacefully outside and inside beneath. The low beams and candle flicker. The alchemist prepares a new recipe. This one he has waited to brew for many years, its ingredients too rare, its instructions too delicate. Its purpose, not for healing, nor for dreams, but for starlight, the celestial tonic. A whisper of a potion first, mentioned in a 10th century scroll found in the ruins of an observatory on a hill where no wind dares to rise. It was said that monks once drank it before stargazing, to still the thoughts, to sharpen the soul, to feel the movement of the heavens inside their blood. And now, with all ingredients finally gathered, the alchemist readies his tools on the worn wooden table. He lays the silver feather, a shard of obsidian, a bowl of snow caught at midnight, a strand of comet, moss, and a pinch of powdered meteor stone crushed finely beneath a wax seal. He moves gently, each motion a lullaby in itself, each clink and stir a soft heartbeat in the quiet room. The bowl of snow is set atop the warming stone, not too hot, just enough to coax it into cool liquid, clear as breath on winter glass. He drops the comet moss in watching as it unfurls like a sleeping fern waking under the stars. Then comes the powdered meteor sprinkled with the silver feather, tiny sparks crackling but silently like applause from a dreaming sky. The tonic begins to shimmer, a gentle swirl of silver and blue, and the scent that rises is not a smell, but a memory. of night air and cold fingers wrapped around a cup, and the hush before a shooting star appears. The alchemist stirs once clockwise and dips the feather into the liquid, pulling it out, slowly watching as the drops cling to the tip, then fall in slow motion back into the bowl. 1, 2, 3. Then he pours the tonic into a glass vial no larger than his thumb and seals it with moon wax. He holds it up, and through the glass the room seems to shift. The walls grow dimmer, the air softer, and he can hear, if he listens closely, a sound like wind across deep snow or stars singing in their sleep. He smiles, tucks the vial into a soft pouch, and walks outside. The sky is clear tonight, the kind of clear that makes you feel very small and very grateful. He climbs the path behast the dream garden, past the grove of owl trees, until he reaches the flat stone on the hilltop. There he sits and waits, letting the sky speak first above. Constellations pulse like slow breath, Orion's belt softly aligned, and Cassiopeia's chair tipped just so, as if inviting him to sit. He opens the pouch, uncorks the vial, and sips the tonic. It is cool, but not cold like night wind just before dawn. And with it comes a stillness that wraps around his heart and smooths every wrinkle in his mind. He feels the slow dance of the planets, the steady spin of the earth, and hears the far-off humming of stars that have not yet been born. And then from the leather pouch he pulls out the silver feather, its tip glowing brighter, now not from any fire, but from the tonic inside him. With the feather he writes on a small piece of parchment, not words, but movements, a spiral, a line, a curve, like the tail of a comet, a symbol once etched on the inside of an ancient bell in a chapel long since swallowed by moss. Each stroke, a meditation, each motion, a kiss to the sky, and, as he writes, the wind begins to echo his rhythm, and somewhere, deep in the trees, an owl calls, then falls. Silent again, the alchemist places the parchment beneath a stone, a gift to the earth, or perhaps a map for the stars. Then he leans back on the stone and stares upward, his eyes heavy with calm, his heart light. He does not need to sleep, because the tonic has made his body feel like sleep itself, a floating thing, a feather caught in a breeze. And there, beneath the canopy of ancient light, the alchemist's dreams awake, not of the past nor the future, but of now, of this breath, this silence. The silver feather rests beside him, its glow fading slowly, softly, like the hush of morning before birds remember to sing. Let yourself relax again, like a candle settling in warm wax, and breathe slowly, deeply, as if you were drawing comfort from the pages of an old book left open by moonlight in a quiet library. You are safe, you are warm, and the story continues softly from where we left off. Our story tonight drifts gently from the hilltop, where the alchemist still lies beneath the stars and floats back into the past far away. In a forest village known only on maps, long faded, there once lived a bellmaker who worked in silence in a tower that never chimed. His name was Osric, and he forged bells not for churches nor for clock towers, but for dreams. Each bell he made was tuned not to sound but to silence, to a hush so deep you could hear the breath of time. The alchemist, in his youth, once visited Osric's tower, seeking a bell that could soothe nightmares and invite peaceful sleep. The bell maker showed him a tiny chime, smaller than a walnut cast from dream copper and alloy, whispered about only in the alchemical texts of the old universities near the Rhine. He told the young alchemist, this bell would ring only in dreams, and only when the dreamer needed rest most its sound, a shimmer, not a note. That meeting, though brief, changed the alchemist's understanding of sound, of energy, of peace. And so years later, as he sits beneath the stars, he remembers Osric's tower and the low hum of his quiet forge. Inspired, the alchemist gathers his satchel and walks back to his cottage where embers still breathe in the hearth inside. He opens a box carved from moon birch and takes out the tiny dream bell, the same one gifted to him long ago. He sets it gently on the table next to a scroll of notes and the silver feather. Tonight, he will try something new. He will inscribe the feather with Osric's humming pattern, the same curve of silence shaped in copper, but now written in silver and ink, so it may carry stillness through the air, not through metal, but through thought. He dips the feather in twilight ink, a mixture he prepared years ago from crushed moth wings, evening dew, and soot from a fire that never burned wood. And with the slow grace of one whispering a lullaby, he draws on thin parchment lines that ripple outward. Like circles in still water, a language not made of letters, but of feelings. One line for hush, one for pause, another for rest. Then one for surrender, the soft letting go of worry. The bell on the table does not move, but somehow the air around it grows thicker, as if the parchment hums silently, just like Osric's bells once did. The feather glows faintly and then dims as if it has passed on its message. The alchemist leans back, eyes half-lidded, and exhales deep, long light wind across moss. In that moment, somewhere, a child stirs in their sleep, smiles. The bell's effect is not bound by walls or time. Its silence, now woven into the ink, into the feather, into the night. And as he watches the candlelight flicker, He thinks again of how bells once guided travelers, marked beginnings and endings, and signaled time, not by minutes, but by meaning. He places the parchment beneath his pillow, not to read, but to dream through, and the feather he sets on the windowsill, its tip pointed toward the North Star outside. The leaves shift gently, as if agreeing with what has just been done. The stars seem brighter, or perhaps the quiet makes them feel closer. And in the deep hush that follows, the alchemist whispers, not aloud, but with his thoughts, a thank you to Osric, to the feather to silence itself. Then, with a warm cloak drawn around his shoulders, he settles in his old armchair, a book on his lap, not to read, but to hold as a comforting weight. The hearth crackles once, then settles into soft, glowing coals, and the only sound in the room is the slow rhythm of peaceful breath. Welcome back. Drift a little deeper now, sink softly beneath the surface of thought, as if you're lying in a boat that rocks ever so gently on a still lake. Warm breezes brushing over you like whispers from the trees. The room is dim, the night is calm, and the tale continues like a thread woven through a dream. Our story now turns to a place just beyond the alchemist's home, past the lavender hedges. After a day spent writing silent spells and ink-whispered symbols, the alchemist took his silver feather and walked down the path under a sky of pearl-gray clouds. With each step, his boots pressed softly into moss, and tiny moths floated past like flecks of moonlight made alive. The meadow greeted him with stillness and a hush, as though time itself bowed to the flowers' sleepy rhythm. He knelt near a patch of full bloom and dipped the feather into the heart of one blossom, letting it soak in moon nectar, light as mist, cool as breath. The feather absorbed it slowly, glimmering faintly, changing from silver to soft lavender blue. He moved from flower to flower, tracing the same shape each time, a spiral that always began with a breath and ended with a pause. Then he returned home, and set the feather beside his bed, where it pulsed gently, not glowing, but breathing that night as he lay beneath woven quilts. The alchemist dreamed of nothing, just peace, not a void, but a fullness so complete it needed no story, no sought. In the morning, he woke with the hush still wrapped around him, as if the meadow had followed him into the waking world. Birds chirped softly outside, but they too seemed to sing in slower notes, as if, out of respect for the quiet he carried. He poured tea with steam curling upward like silver ribbon, and dipped the tip of the feather into his cup, infusing it with memory, with dream residue, with stillness distilled into taste. The tea was warm, floral, not sweet, but steady, and he sipped it, while watching sunbeams slide across the floor. Later that day, a villager knocked at his door, a woman named Ellen with a baby in her arms, whose eyes would not close, whose cries had no cause. The alchemist smiled and asked only for a strand of the baby's hair, just one, fine and golden. He tied it around the silver feather where it shimmered like a thread of sunlight tied to moonlight. He held the feather over the baby's forehead, just above the brows, and traced a circle in the air. Then a second, smaller, then a last. The child exhaled deep, and the crying stopped. Eyes fluttered, then closed. The mother's mouth opened in thanks, but the alchemist simply handed her the feather and said nothing. She left with it clutched to her chest, and he stood there for a while, hand on the doorframe, listening to the wind. He wasn't a healer, not truly, not in the way the monks or surgeons were. But he understood stillness, he respected the sleep within things, and he trusted the silver feather to carry that wisdom wherever it was needed. That evening, he returned to the meadow to collect again, to listen, not to the wind or the leaves, but to the silence between each, the space where sleep begins. And in that hush, the alchemist whispered, not a spell, not a chant, but a soft thank you to the flowers, to the moon, to the quiet. The feather glowed again, but this time only briefly, as if bowing in return. Then all was still. Settle in, feel your breath slow, like a soft tide washing onto quiet sand. Let the hush between words hold you gently, like warm wool around your shoulders. The alchemist's house held more than herbs and silver feathers and glowing dust in tiny jars. It also held bells, not just any bells, but soft-toned brass and bronze ones, each strung along a velvet cord, each tuned to a different memory. They hung in doorways, from rafters and over the fireplace, some shaped like tulips, others like stars, and a few so small they chimed only in wind's lightest whisper. He did not ring them for sound, but for silence, because in the hush after each chime, something sacred lingered, a kind of listening, a pause where the world waited to hear something secret. Each bell had a purpose, one to mark the arrival of dusk, its note a low hum that sounded like the closing of a book, one to mark the steeping of sleep, tea, its chime high and distant like laughter from a memory, and one, the smallest, hung near his writing desk, a bell that rang only once each week when he dipped his feather into a fresh vial of ink and began to write dreams. These were not stories in the usual sense, but recipes for peace, woven in script, so looping and soft, they looked like trails left by smoke. One scroll told of clouds caught in glass and how they could be released during storms to calm thunder. Another told of lullabies written backward, meant only to be hummed while walking through moonlight. He never sold these scrolls, nor read them aloud. They were simply there, so the house would remember stillness even when he forgot. One evening, as a chill crept into the stone floor and candlelight painted amber pools on the walls, he lit his fireplace with a breath from a hollow reed, a special tool passed down by a quiet uncle, who claimed it had once started fires with wishes alone. The fire crackled low, its sound like leaves being turned by gentle fingers. He sat beside it, the silver feather resting across his lap, and a cup of warm rose-hip tea in hand. Then, from across the room, a bell chimed. Not one of his, it came from the shelf above the back window, where he kept things found, not made. There sat a bell carved from clear stone, too cold, too soft to be quartz. It had no clapper, and yet it rang, just once, a pure sound, like light-given voice. He stood slowly and walked to it, watching as its glow faded into the air, like breath on glass. The feather warmed in his hand, not hot, but full, as if remembering something ancient. He reached out and gently touched the bell's base. His fingertip tingled, his ears buzzed softly, and a memory entered his mind. It was not his own, but one older, of a forest temple where bells were used to call dreams of monks in deep blue robes, sitting still for days, waiting to hear a single note that would unlock a night vision. The alchemist closed his eyes and felt himself drift, not asleep, but not awake either, floating in a space made only of tone and breath and hush. When he opened his eyes, the fire had grown lower, the room cooler, and the bell was silent once again. He returned to his chair. But he did not sip the tea. Instead, he took the silver feather and dipped it into the cooled tea itself, just once. Then he wrote. He wrote a single sentence onto parchment made of pressed lavender and rice fiber. The bell remembers what I've yet to dream. He rolled the parchment, tied it with a strand of moonflower stem, and tucked it beneath his pillow. That night his sleep was deeper than ever, so deep even his heartbeat slowed to match the rhythm of rain. He dreamed of no people, no places. Only sound, a single note, drawn out like a sigh, held forever. And when he woke, the bell above the window had turned to glass. Take a moment and settle into stillness. Let your shoulders drop. Let the quiet nest itself softly in your chest. Feel the hush of night. Pressing gently against the windows, our story continues where the silence deepened inside. The alchemist's stone cottage, with the scent of burnt thyme curling through the air, and the faint glimmer of soot tracing stories on the hearthstones. After the glass bell's transformation, he began to keep a new notebook, bound in mist-colored leather and clasped with a button carved from old driftwood. This notebook was not for spells, nor notes on plants, nor measurements of mercury and moonlight. It was for fog. He called it the veil of vapor, because fog, he believed, was the earth's way of whispering gently. A soft blanket laid across the world to muffle its worries. He began his study at dawn, when the hills around his village swam in silver. Mist and chimney smoke seemed to dissolve mid-air. He walked slowly, barefoot, over dewy moss, with a jar in the way others might catch. Butterflies, of course, you can't bottle fog, not in the usual sense. But he had read in a forgotten footnote of a 12th century hermit who claimed fog carried memory. And if you passed it through cold glass, it would leave behind traces of dream. So the alchemist held his jar to the morning, spoke a gentle word into the neck, and sealed it with a cork blessed with rosemary oil. He took 7 jars that first week, each labeled not with ink, but with a ribbon. Pale green for quiet longing, blue-gray for unshed tears, warm cream for peaceful sighs. He would sit by the fire, open a jar, and simply listen, not with ears, but with the stillness behind the heartbeat. The kind of listening that children do when they think the stars are whispering. And sometimes he heard something, a breath, a hum, once the softest rustle of parchment being turned. He decided then to build something new in the back corner of his cottage, a fog mirror. It was shaped like an old cathedral window, tall, narrow, its frame carved from moon-dried ashwood. The glass wasn't true glass, but layered mica and beeswax coated with a film made from fern oil and powdered pearl. When he placed a fog jar in a hollow at its base, the mirror didn't reflect, it shimmered like the air above summer stones, and in that shimmer he sometimes saw suggestions, not full images, just impressions, the arc of a feather, the outline of a bell, the slant of a letter never written. He began to sleep near it, wrapped in a thick woolen blanket that smelled of lavender and hay, so that, even in dreams, he could listen. One night, a deep fog rolled in from the north, so thick it covered the cottage windows like gray wool. He placed a fresh jar into the fog mirror, lit only one candle, and waited. Hours passed. Then the shimmer turned to ripple like water, disturbed by breath. And in it he saw her, a woman in long robes spun from smoke and snow, with a silver feather tucked behind her ear. She stood in a field of bells, not ringing, but glowing. Their light pulsed with his own breath. As though she knew he watched, she lifted one hand, not in greeting, but in offering, and in her palm was a vial filled with swirling fog and a sliver of what looked like moonlight trapped in thread. She did not speak, but he heard her, not with ears, but through his chest. The last veil is not for the eyes. Then she faded, and the mirror turned clear. The alchemist didn't move for a long time, his hands folded in his lap, his heart ticking quietly beside the candle flame. When he did rise, he found himself humming a tune he hadn't learned but knew all the same. He recorded it in the silver-feathered script onto mist-colored parchment, then folded it, placed it inside a pouch of fog ribbon. That pouch he placed in the hollow of an oak outside his cottage, an offering or maybe a message for the fog. Because sometimes what you write is not meant to be read, but simply returned. The next morning, the pouch was gone, and dew had formed on his windows in the shape of feathers. Close your eyes, feel the warmth of your blanket, the hush of your breath, meeting the quiet air, the stillness that only comes when stars settle in the folds of night. Our story drifts onward through a curtain of fog, now folded back, revealing the next hush-wrapped chapter. The alchemist rested that morning, longer than usual, for the first time in many years. He had dreamed with weight, not drifting phantoms, but grounded symbols, the woman in silver, the feather in her hair, and the fog-bound vial. He began the day by tending his garden, not for ingredients, but for stillness. Each leaf he touched held the cold kiss of dew, and as he trimmed the moonflowers, he remembered something. Moonflowers bloom only at night, and for centuries they were believed to be sensitive to emotion. Ancient herbal manuscripts whispered that if a moonflower bloomed at midnight during the waxing crescent, it could be used to reveal a hidden truth when steeped in wine and silver dust. So he picked 3 with gloved fingers, never letting the petals feel his warmth, and brought them into his cellar. Alchemy table had been cleared. No books, no jars, just a clean linen cloth and the memory of fog still lingering at the edges of the stone floor. He placed the moonflowers in a bowl lined with crushed quartz and ash then took out his oldest vial, the one etched with a spiral that never ended into it. He poured water gathered from icicles and added one breath from a candle that had burned. Since solstice, when he dropped the petals in, they did not sink. They floated quietly, like thoughts, not ready to speak. He whispered the tune the silver woman had left in his heart. Just once, like a lullaby, you hum as you fall asleep, not to sing, but to remember. The water shimmered, the petals spun, and slowly a vapor rose. It smelled of snow and nettle and something else familiar but unnameable. He leaned close, let it touch his face, his closed eyes, his temples, and for a breath he remembered not something from his life, but something older, a cottage, not his, but built the same way, an alchemist, not him, but wearing the same feather, and a circle of children eyes, wide faces, upturned, listening to a story about silver ink, about how feathers could write the names of stars, about how you could trap time in a single drop of fog. Then the vision passed, the petals had faded to gray, the water gone clear, and in the bowl's bottom sat a sliver of crystal, no bigger than a fingernail, but shaped like a feather tip. He dried it, wrapped it in parchment, and placed it in his coat's secret pocket. That night he didn't sleep in his bed. He walked to the northern hill, the one that overlooked the forest's edge, where the sky dipped low enough to feel like a ceiling painted in stars. He placed the crystal on a flat stone, lit a ring of candles around it, and waited. As the moon rose, the crystal began to pulse, not with light, but with memory. He could feel them, the others, the keepers of silver feathers, spread across time, each dreaming the same thread, each whispering through fog and bell and ink. And from somewhere, not here, not now, a voice drifted to him, soft, softer than silk. You have nearly written the whole sky. He looked up and saw not stars, but words, dancing, shifting, curling into stories, his and not his, all joined in silver loops. He reached up, and the feather in his coat lifted not by wind, but by pull, as if the sky itself wished to write, and so he let it. He held out the silver feather, and it wrote upon the dark, not with ink, but with light, a final lullaby, a message for anyone still listening. Sleep. Little dreamer, the fog remembers you. The candles went out, one by one, as if nodding goodbye. And in the quiet that followed, he smiled, placed the feather back into its pouch, and began the walk home. His boots were damp with dew, his eyes soft with sleep, his hands humming with the stories of air. The cottage welcomed him with crackling coals and the scent of warm oatcakes left on the stove. And as he stepped over the threshold, the door closed gently behind him without a touch. Because even wood knows when a story is complete. Dear dreamer, let your body sink a little deeper. Now the story is almost ready to sleep, just like you. So breathe slowly and let your thoughts float as lightly as a feather caught in twilight air. Our final chapter begins in a morning. So quiet, even the sparrows waited before chirping. The alchemist rose before sunrise, but not because of worry or dreams or duty. He simply woke because it was time. Time not marked by clocks, but by a soft knowing, like how flowers open without being told. He dressed in layers, all linen and wool, earth-toned, weather-warmed, with a silver feather tucked safely in his pocket. The cellar was clean books, closed candles trimmed, jars in tidy rows, like soldiers at rest. He passed each table, touching nothing, only nodding, as one does when saying goodbye to rooms that have watched you grow. Then he carried a small pouch to the old willow tree by the stream. Its roots, he had always believed, held secrets, not the dangerous kind, but the kind that hum when the wind passes, the kind that know the names of those who no longer speak them. He sat beneath the tree, the feather resting across his knees, and from the pouch he drew a folded sheet of vellum, aged, softened at the edges. It was the first page, the very first he had ever written with the silver feather, not a spell, not a formula, but a story. He smiled, running a finger over the faded ink, the loop of each letter like a sigh. Then, with quiet fingers, he rolled the page, tied it with dried lavender stems, and placed it in the hollow of the willow, not to hide it, but to return it. 4 stories he'd come to learn don't belong to the writer, they belong to the breath, and the breeze, to the quiet between thoughts and the rustle of turning pages. And then he did one last thing. He took the silver feather and kissed it once lightly with closed eyes. Then he set it down on a moss-covered stone beside the stream. The water touched it just barely, like a thank you, and the feather shimmered softly, then stilled. He didn't need it anymore. Its work was done. He walked home, hands in his pockets, heart gently full. The village would wake soon, bakers lighting their ovens, children chasing chickens, herbalists grinding mint and hyssop. He would still be there, still wave at passers-by, still mend broken hinges, and write in the evenings, but no longer with ink that shimmered, or with potions, soon into glass. Now he would write stories with the ink of memory and the quill of quiet, because magic, he had come to know, was not only in feathers or fog or silver bowls. It was in listening, in remembering, in resting, in sleeping beneath willow trees, beside streams that forget nothing, and in knowing that someone, somewhere, would whisper your story to the stars, long after you had stopped writing. So, if you find a soft wind brushing your cheek as you fall asleep, or hear a bell with no hands to ring it. It might be the alchemist, just saying good night one last time.